My parents forged my name on a $480,000 loan, so I disappeared, and what I did next erased every trace of their control. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. For most of my 20s, I kept my distance from drama, steady job, studio, apartment. Clean credit. I mailed my mom a birthday card every year. No hard feelings. Then I got a letter from the bank, mortgage details, my name, my social, a house I'd never seen. I called her immediately. She sighed and said, "It's all handled." That's when the comm cracked. If it was nothing, why did it feel like theft? I found the deed online, her name nowhere, mine front and center. A real estate agent's email led me to the buyer file, application signed, credit pulled. It was my handwriting, except it wasn't. I remember shaking, staring at that screen. When I asked her why, she said, "You never use your credit anyway." My father called it a family strategy. That moment, I realized I wasn't their daughter. I was a resource. I froze my credit and flagged fraud. My mother exploded emails, voicemails, even a letter left at my door. She said I was ruining everything for Sophie, my sister. Sophie texted, "I thought you supported us." I called my bank. They confirmed withdrawals, $2,000 from my savings. My parents had my online login. I changed every password that night, heart racing, but a nagging thought followed. How much had they already taken? I asked Sophie why she didn't tell me. Her response chilled me. "Mom said you knew, that you were doing it to help." My jaw clenched. I forwarded her the fraud report and Sophie went silent. That week, my job received an anonymous tip claiming I was under financial investigation. Her called me in. I broke down in that meeting room, swearing I'd never mix personal and financial again, but someone wanted me isolated. Rachel, my attorney friend, offered to help pro bono. We drafted a cease and desist to my parents. They responded with a Facebook post painting me as ungrateful, accusing me of abandoning family. Comments poured in. Distant cousins, church folks, even my old piano teacher piled on. "She was always selfish," one wrote. I turned off notifications and sat in silence. The smear campaign had begun and it was working. People I loved thought I was cruel. Chloe found a second mortgage inquiry, different lender, same tactic, my name, forged signature, this time for a new car. I called the dealership. "Your father handled the paperwork," they said. I couldn't breathe. That car was parked in Sophie's driveway. I drove past just to see it. She smiled at me from the porch like nothing was wrong. I wanted to scream. Instead, I took photos. It wasn't just a mistake. It was war. Daniel, a litigation attorney Chloe knew, agreed to consult. "This is systemic fraud," he said flatly. We compiled evidence, bank statements, emails, forged forms. At night, I scrolled their old Facebook posts, vacations, birthday parties, gifts paid with my name. The anger didn't simmer, it boiled. I started recording calls, saving every text, but deep down, I feared what would happen if this went public. Would I be seen as vindictive, or finally, as a victim at work? Someone asked if I was that Maya from the TikTok. My stomach dropped. A clip edited from my mother's Facebook rant had gone viral. Me, pictured with scammer daughter captions, my inbox flooded with hate. Someone mailed a rotten peach to my apartment with a note, "Ungrateful brat." I filed a police report. The officer didn't laugh. But he didn't help either. That night, I slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow. Grandma June called from Florida. "Tell me the truth," she whispered. I did everything. When I finished, she said, "They did it to your Uncle David too. He disappeared after." My heart raced. No one ever talked about Uncle David. Grandma promised to send me his letters, old, handwritten, hidden in a Bible. She believed me. One person did. I cried into my pillow that night. The first time, tears didn't feel like weakness. Judge James approved a temporary injunction, barring my family from further financial activity in my name. The courtroom felt colder than I imagined. My parents didn't show. Sophie wore sunglasses and didn't speak. I watched the clerk stamp the order, final legal reel. Outside, reporters asked if I'd pressed charges. I said yes. My voice didn't shake. Somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of real separation. The night before the next hearing, I found a card slipped under my door. Inside, my childhood photo, age 8, missing front teeth scrawled across with traitor in red marker. I called Chloe. Hands trembling, she stayed on the phone until sunrise. "This is escalation," she said. We reported it to the DA. The fear turned to rage. If they wanted a fight, they'd get one, documented, recorded, and legally binding. No more mercy. Rachel warned me to prepare for countersuits. "They'll play the sympathy card," she said. Sure enough, my parents filed for emotional damages claiming public humiliation. They cried on a live street, said I betrayed them. Donations rolled in. I vomited when I saw Sophie holding a Justice for Family sign. The audacity, but we countered with proof, bank trails, emails, call logs. I wasn't backing down. Not anymore. They wanted court, a fine. Let's drag everything into daylight in court. My mother wore pearls and cried on cue. She said we could use her name, she sniffled. I handed over text transcripts. Please don't, this feels wrong. Judge James raised an eyebrow. My father shifted, red-faced. Then came the recorded call, him saying, she wouldn't notice. The courtroom went silent, no gasps, just cold stares. My hands didn't shake this time. I wasn't just defending myself, I was proving a legacy of manipulation. Sophie took the stand. Her voice quivered, but she stuck to their story. Maya told us to go ahead as she offered. I held up our text thread, me begging her to stop, her replying with a thumbs up. The judge asked Sophie, did you write this? She paused too long. I don't remember. My attorney rested our case. I looked at Sophie, searching for guilt, but all I saw was calculation as she had chosen. They called my work supervisor to the stand hoping to paint me unstable. Instead, she testified to my consistency, my integrity, how I handled harassment calmly. She's the reason we updated our privacy policies, she said. I blinked back tears. They underestimated me again. This wasn't just about fraud anymore, it was about reclaiming my name. My voice, my future. Every lie they told, I matched with evidence. Every smear I countered with receipts. On cross-exam, my father cracked. It wasn't personal, he snapped. It's family equity. The courtroom shifted. Even the bailiff blinked. My lawyer leaned in. That's your confession. We played it back twice. No objections, no denial, just silence. I didn't gloat. I sat straight, hands folded, letting his words hang. That was the moment I stopped hoping for apology. I didn't need it. I needed distance, dignity, and a damn restraining order. The opposing counsel introduced a surprise witness, my cousin Lacey. She claimed I'd lent her money once casually, implying I had a history of informal deals. Did I sign anything? I asked. She stammered no, but we're family. I pulled out the receipt, a Venmo note. Gift for your car. The judge nodded. Relevance dismissed. They were running out of ammo and I was just getting sharper. Lies fell apart faster than they built. Final day, Judge James reviewed everything, paperwork, recordings, testimonies. What you endured, she said, is not just familial strain, it's financial abuse. Gavel slammed, permanent injunction. Damages pending. I walked out without looking back. Outside, reporters swarmed, but I focused on Rachel's hand squeezing mine. You did it, she whispered. I didn't feel joy. Just relief, a quiet, heavy release. I wasn't their bank account anymore. I was my own person on paper and in power. That night, I opened the letters Grandma June had sent. Uncle David's handwriting was shaky but clear. They used me too, he wrote. I vanished to survive. He warned of guilt trips, gaslighting, how silence becomes complicity. I copied one line and taped it above my desk. You owe them nothing for surviving. Reading his words was like inhaling oxygen after drowning. I wasn't just escaping, I was breaking a generational curse publicly. Proudly, permanently. Chloe brought over takeout and wine. To truth, she said. Clinking glasses, we watched a documentary about financial scams, both laughing bitterly. Your family couldn't have made the cut, she joked. I didn't laugh. I said, next time, we write it. That night, I opened a fresh notebook. No names, no lies, just blank space. For the first time in months, I slept with the windows open. No fear, no lies, just fresh air. And tomorrow, Daniel emailed, we're filing for damages this week. It felt surreal. The law was on my side now. I replied, let's go all the way. He smiled in the meeting. You're not just a client, you're a precedent. I wasn't hiding anymore. We submitted everything, timeline files, even psychological evaluations. It wasn't revenge, it was restoration. This wasn't about punishing them. It was about proving I mattered in court, in records, and finally, to myself. A podcast reached out. Your case is shaking things up, the host said. I hesitated, then agreed. My voice trembled at first, but by the end I spoke with clarity. I wasn't ungrateful. I was used. The episode went viral. Emails poured in, strangers sharing similar pain. I replied to everyone. Community found me. In the very space my family tried to ruin me, I was becoming something stronger, proof that survivors speak loudest. Grandma June mailed me the title to a small cabin in Vermont, left in her will. Some things should belong to those who heal. Her note read, I cried in the driveway, ownership finally mine. No strings, no lies. I visited the cabin that fall. Quiet, peaceful, real. I carved my initials into the porch beam. That was my closure. Not a courtroom. Not applause, just space to exhale. Space they could never touch. Sophie sent one last message. It wasn't personal. I stared at it for a long time. No apology, no acknowledgement, just deflection. I didn't reply. I blocked her number, then deleted it. That silence was the final gavel. Not the courts. I wasn't chasing understanding anymore. I didn't need her to see what she did. I just needed to stop bleeding from it. And that meant no more open doors, not even cracks. An anonymous email arrived, screenshots of a private Facebook group, Sophie's support circle. Dozens of posts mocking me, planning smear content, even scripting courtroom lies. Members, family, friends, my old youth pastor, a cousin I once babysat. The betrayal stung more than the trial. Chloe gasped, "This changes everything." Rachel filed a cyberskinker report that afternoon. These weren't isolated attacks, they were coordinated. And for the first time, we had their playbook. Judge James reopened discovery. With the Facebook group exposed, we subpoenaed records, hidden bank accounts surfaced, money funneled through Sophie's LX. My mother was listed as consultant. I felt sick. This wasn't just betrayal, it was organized fraud. Daniel grinned. "This moves us from civil to criminal." Suddenly, the case had teeth. My family didn't just lie, they laundered. What began as a favor became felony-level manipulation. And now, the state was watching too. I received a message from Lily Saunders, a stranger. Mid-20s, "They did this to me too," she wrote. Her mother, my mom's co-worker, used her credit to buy furniture, tens of thousands in debt. Same phrases, same tactics, same silence. We talked for hours. I wasn't alone. This wasn't just my family, it was a network. Predatory elders using trust as leverage. I added Lily's testimony to our case. One victim became too soon. More. Daniel's intern traced the mortgage IP submission location didn't match my home or theirs. It came from a church office, specifically, Reverend Gales Logan, the same reverend who baptized me. I felt sick. We subpoenaed emails. He'd helped validate identity forms for Sophie. His reason, she looked desperate. That broke something in me. Faith wasn't just weaponized. It was complicit. Another mask slept, and behind it, more enablers in Sunday suits. A whistleblower emailed Rachel. Inside, bank screenshots, internal memos, group chat logs, all linked to Project Sophie. Turns out, this fraud wasn't spontaneous, it was planned. Years back, I was marked the moment I got a credit score. "She'll be our asset." One message said, "Not daughter, not sister, asset." I cried in the bathroom stall at work, hands over my mouth, grief and fury braided together. But now I had the receipts, all of them. We presented the Project Sophie files in court. Judge James froze. "This is premeditated fraud," she said. The defense asked for recess. We declined. A silence fell over the room. Heavy. Final. Sophie's face grumbled. My mother went pale. My father whispered something, then hung his head. The illusion shattered. We weren't a family torn apart. We were a crime scene in motion. The gavel didn't fall yet, but the verdict was already written in shame. After court, Rachel showed me an email from the charges filed: wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, 3 counts each. My mother, father, and Sophie. "They'll likely take plea deals," she said. I nodded. No trial drama, no closure speeches, just consequences. The system moved slow, but it moved. I didn't dance, I didn't drink, I cleaned my apartment and opened new locks. Justice didn't feel like fireworks, it felt like finally exhaling after years. A documentary producer reached out. Netflix was developing a series on family fraud. "Your story fits perfectly," she said. I hesitated, but the thought of others like Lily, silenced and shamed, pushed me forward. I agreed, with one clause: protect names of minors. This wasn't revenge, it was warning. When filming began, I watched actors reenact my courtroom moment. It felt surreal but necessary. Truth needed a microphone, and my silence was finally permanently broken. In Vermont, I opened a mailbox for the first time in months. Inside, a handwritten letter from Uncle David. "Alive, they told me you fought back," he wrote. "You're braver than I was." Enclosed was a photo, him holding a rescue dog, smiling. He left a return address. I mailed back that same day. Healing wasn't linear, but it was possible. I wasn't the first, but maybe I'd be the last to face this alone. A local university invited me to guest lecture, Financial Abuse in Modern Families. I walked into the auditorium, knees trembling. Then I saw Lily in the front row, smiling. I began. They said I overreacted, that I imagined it. But documentation doesn't lie. The room was silent, focused. Afterward, a student whispered, "You made me feel seen." That moment was my real verdict, not guilt or innocence, but meaning. My pain had purpose now. Sophie's plea deal went public. No jail time, just restitution and community service. The internet exploded. "She got off easy," some said. I didn't comment. I watched her scrub graffiti off a church wall in silence. That was enough. No screams, no justice monologues, just a brush, a bucket, and her red-rimmed eyes. Consequences don't always roar. Sometimes they whisper, and sometimes they're exactly what the guilty deserve: quiet, humbling, and unmistakably their own. A former teacher emailed me. "I saw your interview," she wrote. "You always had fire in you." I stared at the message, tears welling. All my life, I felt invisible in that household. But people had seen me, just not the ones I bled for. That shift was quiet but seismic. I printed the email, framed it, and hung it near my desk. A reminder: being seen isn't about family, it's about truth. Grandma June passed quietly. In her will, she left me her journals. One entry read, I watched them break David, I regret my silence. But Maya, she fought. I clutched the book to my chest. Crying softly, her belief came too late, but it still came. I donated part of the Vermont cabin to a women's shelter in her name. She couldn't undo the past, but she chose who to bless next. That mattered. Rachel handed me the final settlement check, 6 figures. She smiled. I stared at the amount. It didn't feel like victory, just closure. I used a portion to launch a nonprofit, Credit Safe Daughters, free legal help for financial abuse survivors. Within a month, we had 60 inquiries, paying into purpose. The rest I invested. No flashy spending, just security, real independence. For once, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I was building something forward. The support circle group disbanded, but screenshots lived on. An expose ran in a local paper. Inside the quiet fraud rings. It named names, some apologized, others deleted profiles, a few doubled down. I didn't chase their reactions. I had nothing to prove. Their silence was its own confession. Online, women tagged me in posts, saw this and thought of you. I wasn't a story, I was a symbol. For boundaries, for truth, for freedom. At a speaking event, a woman raised her hand. What if it's your own child doing this, she asked. The room tensed. I took a breath. Then the rule still applies, I said. Love does not mean permission, she nodded, crying silently. That moment stayed with me. Abuse doesn't wear one face. It's not always parents. Sometimes it's kids, siblings, best friends. But the rule holds: love isn't leverage, and silence helps no one. A young intern at the courthouse handed me a note. Your story changed my major. She switched from marketing to law. I want to protect girls like you, she wrote. I tucked it into my bag, stunned. No speech, no spotlight, just impact. Quiet and sharp. For years, I begged my family to see me. Now, strangers saw me clearer than blood ever did. And that, I realized, was the beginning of real legacy. I opened an online forum, Daughters Anonymous. Within weeks, it had thousands of members, women sharing stories of silent exploitation. Some cried, some raged, some just posted bank screenshots, begging for guidance. I moderated late into the night, replying gently, "You are not alone." A woman messaged, "You saved me." I replied, "You saved yourself. I just confirmed what you knew deep down." In that moment, I understood. Advocacy wasn't heroic, it was deeply human. A student group in Iowa invited me to their financial ethics week. I almost declined, then saw their theme, redefining family ties. I flew out, nervous, but their questions were sharp, empathetic. One girl asked, "Do you forgive them?" I paused. "I forgive myself for not seeing it sooner," I said. Applause wasn't loud, but the silence after was respectful. Healing isn't always answers. Sometimes, it's just being able to speak without shaking. Netflix aired the documentary. Overnight, my inbox exploded: offers, threats, praise, disbelief. But one message stuck: "I'm your half-brother. They did it to my mom too." I froze. Proof came days later: photos, records, timelines. My father had a second family, another life, another victim. I added his son to our forum quietly. He wasn't ready to speak. I didn't push. Survival has stages. I was just grateful mine no longer involved secrets choking my throat. A publishing house reached out. "Memoir rights," they said. "You're the voice of a silent epidemic." I asked for creative control. They agreed. Writing was hard. Each word reopened something, but I didn't flinch. I included names, dates, receipts, but also laughter. Small victories, late-night noodles with Chloe, the ugly and the light. When the manuscript was done, I sent it to Uncle David. He replied with one line, "You did what I couldn't, you named it." At a bookstore signing, a woman in her 70s approached me. "My daughter sent me here," she said. I dismissed her pain. "Until I read yours." Her hands shook. She bought 5 copies for my sisters. We hugged, brief, soft, real. That moment cracked something open. My story wasn't just about exposure, it was a mirror forcing hard reflections. And sometimes, the people most afraid to face truth end up thanking you for the flashlight. A news anchor botched the story, called it a family squabble turned court drama. I emailed her, politely furious. She invited me on air live. I hesitated, then agreed. On set, I said, "This isn't drama, it's survival. It's financial abuse hiding behind last names." Her eyes widened. That night, viewership broke records. The retraction aired the next day. My name wasn't mud anymore, it was a movement. And movements don't whisper. They roar when misnamed. Lily texted me late. "My mom asked to reconcile." I waited. Then she added, "I said no." That shook me. Empowerment wasn't always lawsuits. Sometimes, it was quiet boundaries. I replied, "Proud of you." She sent a heart emoji. We didn't need long calls or trauma dumps. Just presence, support, proof we were no longer alone. For years, I begged for family. Now I was building one: chosen, healed, real, no blood required. Rachel texted, "Your name's on the short list for National Advocacy Award." I laughed aloud. Months ago, I hid from mailboxes. Now, nominated for facing them, I didn't care about the trophy. I cared that survivors were being seen, named, honored, not just pitied. The night of the ceremony, I wore the dress Chloe helped me pick. I didn't win, but when the presenter read my name, the applause didn't stop. That was enough. More than, a new volunteer joined our nonprofit. Her intake form listed her skill as cyber forensics. Later, she pulled me aside. Your story made me switch careers, she said. Her first case, tracking forged student loans under a victim's name, her cousin. Full circle, the ripple was real. One voice, then another, then a team. We weren't a hotline anymore. We were a force, and I was no longer their daughter. I was their founder. The day my father's sentencing hit local news, a neighbor knocked. We never knew. She whispered, "We're sorry." Her voice cracked. She handed me a pipe, each homemade. I took it, stunned. For years, I braced for attacks, but this was community. It wouldn't fix everything, but it reminded me not everyone believed the lies sometimes. The quietest gestures heal the deepest bruises. I ate that pie alone. But I didn't feel alone anymore. An old friend messaged, "I believed your mom. I'm sorry." I didn't reply right away. When I did, it was short, "Thanks. I'm healing." No bitterness, just space. People make mistakes, but some hurts aren't reversible. Forgiveness wasn't mandatory, it was optional. I chose peace, not for them, for me. Some bridges stay burned, others rebuild slowly, plank by plank. But I no longer begged people to believe me. My truth stood tall without approval. A teenage girl approached me after a talk. "How do you stop feeling guilty?" I knelt. Eye level. "You didn't cause it, you survived it." Her eyes brimmed. That moment mattered more than press books or applause, because when I was her age, no one told me that. I hugged her, whispered it again. "You didn't cause it." Later, she emailed, "I broke the silence. That's it. That's the win. That's why I stayed loud." A journalist asked what I'd say to my younger self. I paused, then answered, "You were right to ask questions." "Don't stop." That quote headlined her piece. Later, a girl deemed me. That saved me today. Full circle again. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to anyone who dared to speak, to risk exile for truth. Pain echoes, but so does courage, and I'd become an echo they couldn't silence. Netflix optioned the film rights. I retained script approval. The screenwriter asked, "Do we end with court or your nonprofit?" I smiled, "Neither, end with the letter from Uncle David." He nodded. That's the gut punch. Watching actors rehearse, I didn't cry. I just nodded. My truth was on screen, not sanitized, not exaggerated, just real. The kind that doesn't entertain but educates. That night, I walked home under a full moon. No audience, just quiet pride. On the first anniversary of the verdict, I sat on the cabin porch. No noise, no flashbacks, just wind and my breath. I lit a candle for Grandma June, then added a new carving below my initials, "Free." That word didn't mean revenge, it meant boundaries held. A silence broke, lies fell. I wasn't waiting for apologies, I wasn't haunted. I was here, intact. That's the twist. I didn't just survive, I rebuilt, louder, stronger, unbroken. I sat with Lily at the nonprofit's one-year party. She raised her glass to naming it. I nodded. The word abuse once felt heavy, shameful. Now it was a label for what happened, not who I was. Survivors filled the room, laughing, unbroken, not victims, veterans. I clutched the locket Grandma June gave me. Inside, a photo of me age 7 before the lies. That girl didn't vanish, she just needed a voice. I gave her one. In therapy, I practiced saying it. They exploited me. No stutter, no softening, just truth. My therapist asked, "What do you want now?" I answered without pause, peace, not proof. That shift was everything. I no longer lived to be believed. I lived to breathe. My identity wasn't just survivor. It was author, founder. Sister by choice. Forgiveness wasn't required. Closure didn't come from them. It came from choosing myself again and again with no apology. On stage at a Survivor Summit, someone asked, "Do you wish it never happened?" I paused, then said, "I wish I hadn't been alone through it. But no, I don't regret fighting." Gasps, then applause, because the fight taught me how to listen, to lead, to never look away when pain enters the room. My story began with theft, but what I reclaimed was bigger: my name, my voice, my choice to never vanish quietly again. I hung a photo in the nonprofit's lobby, me holding the court order. Beneath it, a plaque, "Let this be your beginning, not your proof." Survivors often ask if justice ever feels like enough. My answer: it's not about enough, it's about never again. I didn't get apologies, but I got legacy, community, boundaries that don't bend. And above all, I got to stop explaining myself. That alone, that's freedom money can't buy. At a graduation ceremony, I handed Lily her law school diploma. "You helped me get here," she whispered. I smiled, holding back tears. No spotlight, no headlines, just a quiet passing of strength. What began with a stolen signature ended with scholarships, court wins, and legacy. That's how generational trauma ends, not with a bang, but a hand extended. And for once, the future didn't look like a battleground. It looked like a beginning. Netflix's final scene showed me lighting a candle in the Vermont cabin. Real footage, no retakes. That moment, raw and unfiltered, ended the credits. I watched from the back of a screening room, surrounded by survivors. No applause. Just tears, the kind that cleanse. That's how stories should end, not with justice served, but truth spoken. I stood, nodded to the audience, and whispered to myself, you were worth every battle. I updated the nonprofit's mission: no silence, no shame, no stolen futures. The new banner hung in our lobby, beside letters from girls we helped. I touched one handwritten in pink gel pen. You made me believe again. That was my reward. Not cash, not revenge, but restored belief in law, in truth, in self. What they tried to erase became the blueprint for how others could rebuild. That's real inheritance. That's mine now. On my desk sits a photo, me, Lily, and Chloe laughing mid-sentence. No trauma, no pain, just joy. We built something from ashes, not despite it, but because of it. My name isn't what they called me. It's what I answered to in court. On screen, in history, Maya, it means illusion. But I was never the lie, I was the light. And now I live like it. Loud, clear, and unapologetically seen. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.